Welcome to The Touch of a Mustang, coming to you from the beautiful mountains of Colorado. This is the first episode of a brand new podcast and the chance to share something that's been on my mind for a long time, and that is telling the story of Mustangs and how they heal us as humans. So if you like horses, this is a podcast for you. If you love Mustangs, this is definitely a podcast for you. And if you're interested in how we can make our life better and how we can heal from the struggles and traumas in our life, even just the difficult times, then this is also a podcast for you. To begin the podcast, I wanted to start by telling a little bit of my story and why Mustangs have become such a huge part of my life that I literally spend every extra penny on them. I want to start off with my background with horses. I grew up in Arizona, and horses have always been a part of my life. My mom got her first horse, an off-the-track thoroughbred, when she was 16 years old, and she did all kinds of things to train it, and then it had some babies, and I grew up riding some of its babies, and also another horse that was supposed to be my sister's, that was a quarter horse, Arabian. And so that's what I'd known my whole life. I was drawn to it more than my siblings were, and that's kind of how I inherited my sister's horse. She got it when she turned 16 and then became interested in other things that 16-year-olds are interested in, like boys and friends. And I took her and started training her and working with her, and she was my go-to horse. Her name was Sahari. I spent many times in the mountains of Arizona riding her around. My favorite memories are hopping on with a bareback pad and flip-flops, tying the flip-flops to the bareback pad with twine, and taking off into the mountains with my mom and my sister. And those were some of the greatest memories of my life. As I grew older, like many people do, I kind of moved away from horses. Different things started to take priority. I went to college. I came back from college and started working. And then I got married. And we went off to Colorado for my husband's schooling. And that is where my adventure with Mustangs began. A couple years after my husband got out of school, we moved to a small community, a great equine community. And I was drawn to it because there's enough land with most of the houses that you can also have horses. And it has trails behind the houses all over the town. So when we were looking for places, it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to get a horse again. And we did end up getting a horse. We got a free horse. And it was a kid's horse. He wasn't my favorite, but the kids would go out and hop on him and pick their chickens up and go on him. And that was good until he bucked one of my kids off. And I was also pregnant again. So we decided to get rid of this horse. It just felt like too much. I was pregnant with my sixth baby. And that's kind of where the story begins of Mustangs coming into my life. So about 8 years ago now, I had my sixth baby. And a short time after that, when he was about 3 months old, I adopted my first Mustang. And then a few months later, my husband started a difficult journey of really struggling with his mental health. And that is where a lot of the power of Mustangs originated in my life. When this all started to play out, I had 6 kids under 12, and I will never say that neither would my husband. We had a fluffy, lovey marriage. A friend once told us that she was a little jealous because we were passionate because we fought a lot, sometimes in front of our friends, apparently. had a lot of disagreements. We have friends who say they never fought, not us. That's just not who we are as people. So, if you want an example of a conflict-free marriage, ours is definitely not it. But we were doing okay. And then this crisis hit, and I was devastated. I learned a lot from it. And a lot of my learning came from my interaction with horses. When my son was 3 months old, I went down to the BLM office with 6 kids in tow and put in my application, not knowing really anything about Mustangs. And in fact, I thought that they would probably tell me no, because probably someone with 6 young kids shouldn't have a wild horse. But I had the facilities, and they didn't say no. I came upon my first Mustang on the internet. Like I say, did not know much about Mustangs. I don't even know if I could have told you that they were horses that ran wild. Certainly I'd heard of them, but I knew more about Arabians. And one day I was feeding my little baby, kind of hiding away from the kids for a little bit, scrolling on my phone, and apparently looking for horses, because if you love horses, that's what you do a lot of the time. And I saw the picture of my first Mustang. She was standing on a big pile of dirt in the BLM corrals in Canyon City. And I couldn't get her out of my mind. She was a gorilla, and I'd always kind of had this dream in the back of my mind. Buckskin. I didn't even know what a gorilla was. I kind of showed her my husband. He said, "Oh, she's pretty." And that little bit of encouragement prompted me to go put my application in, get a background check, because in Canyon City, the Mustangs are housed on the prison grounds. And so you have to get clearance to go into the prisons. And in a few short days, I got everything in order, and I was going to see her, and I'd put a deposit down on her. I had no idea what I was doing. I guess maybe it was kind of a game. I don't know that I ever thought she was going to really come home with me, but she did. I was a little bit hesitant at first if I should really take on training a wild horse, but my husband assured me, "Your mom trained her horses. I'm sure you can too." I had horses I was a teenager. As teenagers, we often feel like we know everything, and that's kind of my memory of horses. I know what I'm doing. This Mustang came and told me just how little I knew about horses and about psychology, which I happen to have a master's degree in. Horses taught me a lot about our behavior and why we act the way we do. She taught me a lot about emotions, and life, and how to learn to work with Mustangs. I don't know that every Mustang would have taught me this. She was difficult and headstrong. I have another Mustang now. He is as laid back as can be, although anxious. But you ask him to do anything, and he'll follow you. He'll do it. He was the kind of horse that I probably expected, that if you just showed a little bit of force, then you would be able to manage it, and he'd try and keep himself under control. But not my first Mustang. Her name's Silveny. She is named after the Alicorn and Keeper of the Lost Cities, which was a book that I had been reading with my kids, and I kind of thought, my kids are all going to grow up and leave me, and Silveny will still be around and kind of be that reminder of those great times. And that's what's happening right now. My kids are growing up. So I was ready to jump in, and the more I looked at Mustangs, the more I saw about them, and you see the extreme Mustang makeovers, and you see people doing incredible things with their Mustangs in like 30 or 90 days. And so I had really high expectations and pretty limited knowledge, I can now say. But as I went to work with my Mustang, I realized she was not on board with this plan. She had plans of her own, and those plans included staying where she felt safe. She ended up being halter trained at the prison with the wild horse inmate program, which I don't think they're doing anymore, but such an amazing program. And just being there and seeing it again, I saw the power that horses have in our lives. And even before I really learned a lot of lessons, I recognized that horses do something for us. I remember once I was riding through the mountains in Arizona, and I told my mom, I just don't know how anybody can live their lives without horses, because I knew that it did something for me. And now I feel like I'm just beginning to understand a little bit of it. But let's go back to the story. So I have about a 6-month-old baby, 5 other kids. My husband is struggling terribly, and I'm more or less just trying to hold myself together. And when my husband really started to struggle, which I don't want to say too much about his experience because that's his, but I was angry. I kind of had the mentality that, like, you need to suck it up and get over it. We have things to take care of in life. We have 6 kids to take care of. But that wasn't helpful, and it wasn't going to happen. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to tell him the tools he could use. I have a background in psychology, so I felt like I had studied it a lot, and I would suggest tools to him. None of it was working, and it was pure unhappiness. It's just getting to the point where I don't, cry about it all the time by talking about it, because now I'm able to see the lessons that I was able to learn from it. So it started as kind of anger towards him, and then it turned into a lot of self-reflection between my experience with him and trying to train this wild Mustang. I just want to talk some about the lessons that I learned. And one of the biggest lessons I learned, which was a really hard lesson for me to learn, was to let go. And I began to learn that because I realized with my Mustang, I could no longer follow the guidance that were things like show 'em who's boss, because it was not working with her. She was way stronger than me, and she didn't feel safe with me. She didn't feel okay with me. And so I had to let go of that, of my expectations and the things that I thought were truths, both in horsemanship and in personal relationships. I had to learn to start letting go, to let go of control and to let go of expectations, and even to let go of self-doubt and probably a lot of self-hatred, I'll go so far to say, that had built up because of experiences. And I say, like, we were going along great, and then my husband had these mental health issues. But the truth is, I don't know that I was ever in, personally, a good, healthy, honest place with myself. I was really good at getting things done, at doing what I should for my kids, at even going above and beyond what might be expected of any mother. I was working from home, homeschooling my kids. I was beginning to learn that I had to start letting go. I couldn't control everything. And the irony of this is that it was a lesson that I would need so much more as life and time went on. It's easy to be angry or upset. It was for me. But now that I'm in a different place, I can really look back and I can see that there was definitely a divine hand that was helping me to learn the lessons that I needed to learn moving forward in life. And just talking about God, our Creator, I feel like He was a central piece in guiding me into bringing horses back into my life, and not just horses, but Mustangs. And it seems like all of my most recent, just really major struggles in life are connected to some of the horses that I have. But I was beginning to learn these lessons of needing to let go. And I began to see with my husband that I couldn't control his experience. This was a pattern through my life that brought up so many things for me. And it's just incredible the way the experience started to reflect not on things that other people needed to change, but places where I needed to get to a better place. I found out that there were real control issues in my life, both with feeling control from others rather than listening to myself and my needs. And in that same vein, I felt like I should be able to control my family experience, how it all played out, how my kids turned out, what our family should appear like and be like. And all these things began to be brought into question. We had been able to put up the appearance of being really together and with it. And this time period really just highlighted that there was more growth and learning that I needed to do. It was painful. It was so painful. And honestly, I feel like, in the military, they say break you down before they can build you back up. And I feel like though it was done in a different way, these experiences kind of did the same thing for me. They almost had to destroy my entire foundation before I could start building things up in a healthier way. It's such an ongoing experience. As I said, this was 8 years ago, and I now feel like I have more to learn than ever, where before I felt like I know how to do this life. I know how to fix things. I know how to manage things. I know how to raise kids. And now it's so much more of a learning experience. During this time period, it was a lot to deal with, a lot of emotions. My husband's struggles would reflect back on me. I'd feel responsible for him. And even to the extent that they were my fault, that I could fix them, I began to learn that wasn't the case. It was incredibly difficult. And horses, Silveny, she was the only horse I had at the time. She became a release from it all. And not just a release, but a place where I could learn the lessons that I needed to outside of the high emotional environment of relationships. And so I began to learn, and I followed horse trainers and was lucky to find some horse trainers who really focused on not just the horse, but on how our interactions impact the horse. And I started to learn about myself. At first, Silveny was halter trained, but I couldn't even take her out of the corral without her exploding. And I began to see that a lot of this, not all of it, but a lot of it was a reflection of my anxiety. And this anxiety revolved around this deep desire to keep my kids safe, to have my family the way it should be, to be healthy. Just had these tremendous anxiety, fear that things would go wrong, fear that children would end up hurt, something bad would happen to them. And all this fear and anxiety began to be reflected in my interactions with Silveny. So we would walk out of the corral, and I would imagine the worst case scenario, her kicking me, my kids not having a mother, and these racing thoughts would just fly into my head. And make the situation worse. It wasn't a quick or easy process. I wanted it to be, but it wasn't. And I began to realize that I had to change myself. And one of the greatest lessons I learned, so happy that I learned this, is that the littlest progress is progress still. And it's the best kind of progress to make. It feels great to have huge steps forward, but that's not usually how it happens. And it certainly is not how it was happening with my horse training or with my personal life. And it began to be a series of the smallest progress. I kid you not, we would take a step out of the crowd and no one would explode and we'd go back in. And that would be success for that. It sounds almost ridiculous. And I certainly felt a little pathetic as I was walking one step with my horse out of the corral, and these other people were getting their Mustangs and 5 days later going on trail rides. I had to fight a lot of self-doubt because of that and let go of what I thought should be, which went right back to applying it to life and accept where we were at, where I was as a person and as a horse trainer, and start working from there. And that's maybe one of the greatest lessons that I learned, is that I couldn't change who I was, who my horse was, who the people around me were, by wishing it to be different. All that I could change was myself. And when it came to things that I really struggled with, that change came slow and hard and through persistence and dedication. I began to take the tiniest steps, but make sure that they were in the right direction, and to take the tiniest amount of progress and recognize it and move forward from there. And yes, I had to accept that I was not a 30-day Mustang trainer. In fact, our journey was more like a 3 to 5 year plan. And I had to accept that my personal life was not what I expected or wanted it to be. It was what it was. And I got to choose how I addressed that and reacted to that. And so, as I continued to learn with my Mustang, I learned that it was necessary for me to not control her, but to work with her and for us to teach each other. For me to teach her that she was safe, and for her to teach me that I had things left to learn, that she was ready to teach me. And I have to say, she's the best teacher that I've ever had. And I would just have these crazy insights when I would go out with her. I would leave my house, which felt like it was an emotional turmoil some of the time. And I would go out with her and it would be gone. And I would work with her and I would get these insights and answers to things that I was really struggling with in my life. And maybe more than anything else, it wasn't easy. We were still going along with a good bit of struggle along the way, and I was definitely having to learn and coming to a lot of roadblocks. But I began to learn to let go and to build a relationship, a partnership with her where I had a say and she also had a say. And it began to teach me lessons about life and psychology, the way we behave. A lot of people will say that horses are mirrors to the people that they are around, and they really do reflect and respond to our behavior and our actions. And I think that's one of the things that gives them such an incredible healing power, is because they are so pure in their responses. It's not muddled with verbal communication. It's instant physical response that we cannot control, but we can influence. And so these lessons to let go of control were so powerful because I had to come to the point where I had to be able to let go of the outcome in my family life. And it came to another really important lesson that I learned from Silveny. And this lesson was that when you face your fears, they stop having so much power over you. Up until that point, I had been racing away from my fears, doing everything to avoid them. One important thing I learned in horsemanship is that you can get really anxious and try and get past something that's going to scare your horses. And if you do, they're still scared. And sometimes that can kind of come back to bite you, that end up reacting to that because they weren't able to face their fear, to look at it and realize, like, this is okay, it's not going to kill me. In that same way, I came to the realization that I had been doing the same thing in my personal life. I was running from my fears. I was tiptoeing around, trying to make sure that my fears didn't come to pass, that I could keep everyone safe. And there finally came a time, which was a huge breakthrough for me, when I finally said, no matter what happens, and anyone who's had a loved one dealing with mental health issues, it's easy to imagine the possibilities of how that might play out, and to feel like if you don't do just the right thing, that you're going to lose someone that you love. And so that's how I had been reacting, trying to be very careful that I did everything right. And I finally got to the point where I could kind of turn around and face my fears and realize I have a realm of responsibility. I need to take care of that realm of responsibility. I can't control that area of responsibility for other people, whether it's your kids or your husband or your parents. It's just not yours to control. And I had been trying to control it, trying to take responsibility for it. I finally realized that I had to step back and focus on my responsibilities. Because while I was taking care of other people's, I was neglecting mine as well. But finally, I turned around and I faced my fears. I imagined the absolute worst case scenario, which I had been doing the whole time anyway, but I had been doing it out of fear. And I instead turned around, I faced the fears, and I realized no matter what happened, I could get through it. I would be able to deal with it if that is what came. But until that happened, what is the use in imagining these terrible possibilities, reacting as if they're reality when they're not? And they weren't my reality. Yes, it was a hard, difficult, emotionally, spiritually trying experience. It was hard, but these other things hadn't happened. They weren't happening right then. And even though I imagined them and I worried about them, that didn't do any good. That pulled me down. It made me incapable of taking care of the things I needed to take care of. It created struggle that wasn't there. And I know this isn't something unique to me. There's a quote that I really love, I believe by Seneca, and he says, our imagination is more often worse than reality. And that's not the exact quote. I'll have to look it up. But We make our reality worse for ourselves because instead of living in the present, we live in fear, we live in anxiety, we live in what ifs, which was, and I won't even say that I've overcome that, just a really big problem that we imagine these worst case scenarios. And no, they're not actually happening in reality, but in our emotional and mental world, we are participating, creating these events. And I had been doing that for myself a lot. And you can't do that without it impacting your behavior. Once I learned to turn, to face the fear, to be in the present, this is my reality. Yes, all these things are possibilities. They might happen. They could happen. If they do, when they happen, then I'll think about it. Then I'll face it. And I will figure out a way, because that's what we as humans do when we're faced with struggle and difficulty. We stand up, we rise to the challenge, and we find a way to face it. It isn't helpful for us to live in that reality in our mind. This was perhaps one of the most powerful lessons that I learned throughout the whole experience. You do what you can, you prepare, you take care of your responsibilities, and then you have to live in faith. You have to live in the moment you're in. There isn't any other choice except to live in false fear in your head. There's nothing truly threatening your well-being, but in your head, in your thoughts, you honestly believe that there is. When I could realize that I was living not in reality, I was living in fear of what might happen. And yes, it could happen. There's a lot of what ifs in life. There are very few guarantees. But why do we waste moments when we're okay building up anxiety and fear that we can't do anything about, even if we wanted to, until it becomes our reality? And then we do. And it's interesting because when we are in a crisis, we are able to deal with it. It is more crippling to think about a crisis that we aren't dealing with and we can't do anything about except worry and think about it. And these were just some of the lessons that I learned through my work with my Mustang. I feel like that is a good place to wrap it up. I really want to get into how Mustangs and horses have helped other people, because if there's anything that I know so deeply in my soul that just causes feelings that are tangible, the way horses can impact our lives for the better is one of those things. And so I can't wait to see what I'm able to learn from others who have had experiences like mine. And it's almost a disservice to talk about it because you take so much away from it, but it's really the only way that we have. We can't convey the feeling of the experience until you've been there. But I hope that in talking about it, it will give others the encouragement and the opportunity to build relationships with horses. And anyone who's familiar with horses knows that we have so many of them waiting and holding that are Mustangs. And our country is sitting on a gold mine that they're not even taking advantage of. And I really believe that we have a lot of turmoil and sickness in our world and our culture today. And I know from my experience that Mustangs are one of the ways that we can make that life better. So I hope you'll join me in talking with others about Mustangs and horses and how they heal and teach us. And if you have a story yourself, please reach out because I want to hear it. I want to learn and know everything I can about what these horses do for us.